time, and then he saw on Facebook that I was going to preach there, so he came and listened to me. That's the only time I met him, and that's like 7 years ago or something like this, approximately. Now, a few days ago, I haven't been in touch with him, I think, pretty much at all since then. Haven't heard anything. But a few days ago, he wrote to me, and he was like asking me about the Sabbath and stuff, and that led to, like, I think on Friday we had like a several hours long chat on Facebook about, he had questions about the Sabbath and different things, and then this weekend we talked as well on Skype, and we had a good talk. To me, it's very interesting. He's a Christian that doesn't really belong to, he has been in some different churches, but right now he doesn't really like belong anywhere, he feels like. So he was also asking about our church and this and that, and he wants to study, will probably study in a few days or maybe next weekend about how to keep the Sabbath. He wanted to study that. So anyway, I just found it was very interesting that he has actually went to like something like a mission school and been a missionary a couple of years too. So my impression of him is that he is a sincere seeker of truth. And so it'd be very interesting to see if that's the case, and if we have the truth. And I like how Ellen White put it, it is as certain that we have the truth as that God lives. And I believe that. So anyway, if that's the case, I think eventually, by God's grace, he will become an Adventist. So we'll see. That's kind of an interesting story. And one interesting thing with it is that, like, years ago, it could look like, okay, I met him, he wrote to us, he listened to me preach once, but it seemed like it wouldn't really lead to anything. But now, like 7 years later, he had also met some other Adventists, he told me about it, that they didn't really convince him about the Sabbath and stuff, but he remembered some things they said. So he still mentioned some of the things to me. So sometimes, it takes a long time. We don't see maybe that it does really make a difference what we have done or said or something, but maybe years later we'll suddenly see, or sometimes we'll not see before we come to heaven, what a difference something did. And actually, one other kind of like on a similar note, something else which is also kind of from this, like, very recent, is quite interesting. 10 years ago or so, I moved up to what is known as the northernmost town in the world, in the north of Norway, Hammerfest. It's northernmost, I believe it's the northernmost Seventh-day Adventist church in the world, probably. I've heard it referred to it as that. Anyway, I was a Bible worker there for 2 years when I was like 19, 20 years old. And in that city, it's kind of an interesting place to live. It's in the summer, the sun never goes down. It never sets. It's like before it goes below the horizon, it goes up again. So it's pretty light. Right now, that's the case, actually. Right now, it's no sunset up there right now. And in the winter, you never see the sun for a couple of months. It's kind of interesting. You have the northern lights, though, so that's kind of nice in that time. Anyway, so I was a Bible worker there. And basically what happened, this is actually, I don't know, maybe a month ago or something, 1.5 months maybe. Like a guy that I don't know, like a Muslim guy living up there, he added me on Facebook, and then he wrote something to me. I saw we had several common friends. And I think he lives in the same street as one of the church members up there or something. And I think she encouraged him to, like, add me on Facebook or something. She told him about me and so on. So we started to write a little bit back and forth. He seemed to be pretty open and enjoying, being in touch. I sent him some links to some sermons and stuff that he listened to, and he seemed like he liked it. So anyway, so he's a young guy, Muslim background, and so this weekend I was like, man, he seems pretty open and pretty positive, like, to everything I write to him and send to him. He seems like he really appreciates it. So I asked if he, I asked if we could, talk on Skype or something sometime. And I wanted to share some, things from the book of Daniel and stuff with him. I thought he would be interested in. So basically this weekend I also I talked with him for the first time. I've never met him in my life, actually. I've never only written to him. But we talked this weekend about, basically we had our first Bible study, and he liked it. He seems to be very open. So we'll probably be studying every week now. And he will actually, in like a month, a little bit more than a month, he will actually move to south, the south of Norway, so a different part of the country, to attend the Seventh-day Adventist boarding school, which is very interesting. So anyway, it was a blessing. It would be interesting to see where it leads. But again, I was up there Bible working 10 years ago. I had no idea that this would lead to me starting to study the Bible with this guy that I have never even met, 10 years later. And it would not have happened probably if I would not have been there up, 10 years ago. And so sometimes, it's interesting to see how God leads. Sometimes we are doing something, saying something, we see no impact, we see no result of it. But years later, God is like really starting to work and really bringing about fruit or watering the seeds we have been sowing. So that's a blessing. I appreciate your prayers for these guys, as I will continue to try to reach them and study with them in the future. And before we kind of move further or into kind of more the topic for today, does anyone have a short testimony maybe on a similar note, maybe something you did or said and maybe years later it didn't look like it would lead to so much and years later you saw something, or maybe you have a story from the Bible you want to mention kind of along these lines that came to your mind? Anyone wants to share something short before we move on? Kind of on this note, feel free right now.
Yeah, I would like to share.
Yes, go ahead.
It also happened about 30 days ago, about the Sabbath actually, that I also through Facebook got in touch with a classmate who I talked to like 5 years ago. Nothing since then. We started talking and it was until today. It's really, really nice to hear about her, how she's doing, just to be friends, we could say. And how everyone is doing, families and future plans. And I was just like, I never thought I would get in touch with her again, would be so positive, more positive than back then. Yeah. Well, that was a good blessing.
Amen. Amen. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else?
Yeah, little story. I met a woman some time ago. I was in France at the time, and she was a Pentecostal Christian, and I invited her to a Bible study because somebody invited her to a church that I was visiting, in fact, and she had made an announcement about she's a nurse, so she had just come to France and she had made an announcement she wanted a job. So I just decided I would take her contact details because well, maybe I could ask around myself and then bring some aid to her. And then that week, at the end of that week, I was on my way home and I was reading a book and at the bus stop, and she was across the street. And she came across just to tell me, because she saw a familiar face, and she said, "Oh, I read that book." So I said, "Really?" And the bus came, and I said, I gave her quickly an address because I was going to a Bible study, and I said, "Come to this Bible study tonight." And I left, and I actually forgot about it. So she came to the Bible study, and we discovered that she lived near to me, just across the forest. So I used to invite her to my home, and we would talk, and we talked mainly about the Sabbath, because we had so many things that concurred, we agreed with each other on some things, but she was blocked on the Sabbath. And then afterwards, I just didn't try to convince her of anything, because I said, well, she loves Christ, it's very obvious and so on and everything. So we just went to the Bible study together and all of that. Bible study was about the Bible, it wasn't about the Sabbath or anything like that. And then one time she came to church and she said, "Which church you go to?" She came to church, and then shortly afterwards she said she wanted to be baptized. And I said, "What convinced you?" Because afterwards we were just friends. I didn't preach or anything like that. And she said, "You convinced me." I said, "Really? But you had so many arguments against such and such." She said, "No, it's not arguments, it's your life." I said, "But my life, you know me very well, my life is definitely not." And she said, "Exactly. Because you're just a normal person, you're making mistakes, you're trying hard like anybody else, And, you know, I used to think that Adventist people were these hypocrites, or these people who were, you know, what do you call it, obeyed, the, you know, tried to legalistic and so on. So my thing is that I realized that no matter what you say, maybe a greater influence is your life, and a sincere life, not a perfect life, because I'm definitely not perfect, and she's seen me in all my states. But that's what she said, and for years she kept that story whenever somebody asked her, how did she become an Adventist? So it's interesting that the Holy Spirit can work through you if, you know, in your brokenness.
Right. That's cool. That's kind of like an unexpected thing, you know, God did, you know, like, or used. Yeah, I'm sure there will be many great testimonies in heaven, like kind of surprising things that led to surprising outcomes. One last comment, maybe? Someone else want to share a last? One more, if there is someone. Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, anyway, let's go then. Yeah, one thing I was reminded of, I guess also the first testimony Yara sharing here, it's like, it's a blessing. Technology is a blessing. You know, we should use it as much. It's used for evil, but we should use it as much as we can for good. God can definitely use that a lot. I wish I could have been down with you, Hergelia, in person, but it's a blessing. Zoom is a blessing. We have good tools today that we can use to witness to people so far away, you know, in different countries, different places. So anyway, that's a good thing to take advantage of. So we're getting into today, or right now, starting this morning, getting into the importance section. So we're going to look at learn some important things, clarify some important common misunderstandings and so on today and tomorrow, and yeah, the whole week pretty much, I guess. So yeah, we'll get started this morning. As we start, maybe we could actually turn to the book of Hosea chapter 12, verse 13. Hosea chapter 12, verse 13. So that's right after the book of Daniel. So that's a way to find it. We have Hosea. So if someone can find that verse and read for us, Hosea chapter 12, and then verse 13 there.
And by a prophet the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt, and by a prophet was he preserved.
Thank you. So here we see, by a prophet, God brought Israel out of Egypt. A prophet played a key role in that time, in that important transition from Egypt to Canaan. And you see that pretty much in every important phase of God's church, when something important is accomplished. We kind of got a taste of that in the study, in the prophetic sandwich study. We see at every important phase of God's church, a prophet plays a key role. I've said it before, but it bears repeating because it is very important. If we only believed in Ellen White, if we only believed in her, read her writings, and applied what we learned as we should, we wouldn't be here. In a short time, we would finish the work and go home. So in a similar way, we are getting into the important sections. We are going to understand more why this gift is important, why we need Ellen White in this time. And I think we're going to see that her writings are not just like a nice devotional reading, as some people kind of think, but they are crucially important. And that will be clear to us as we go, and as we clarify some common misunderstanding that hinders even many Adventists that do appreciate Ellen White to realize how much we need this gift, I think, amid the perils of these last days. Now, I read a story about this guy that was in one of the big cities in the United States. He went into into a second-hand bookstore, and he was asked. He was looking over books there, and he asked for the religious books. So he was directed to the back of the store. In the back there of the store, there they had the religious books. So he was looking there, but it seemed like he didn't really find what he was looking for. So the guy working in that store, he asked him, you know, what author he preferred, you know, what is he looking for? And then his reply was, I'm looking for some books from Mrs. E.G. White. And the response of the guy in the store was very interesting. He said, "Oh, really? That's different. Her books are not classed here with these books in the back. Not at all. Not at all. We have them in the front of the store. We have them in the front with the Bibles. Because these books, or her books, are in a class by themselves. Her books are in a class by themselves." And truly, the more I get to know these books, truly I see that the Spirit of Prophecy, the writings of Ellen G. White, the books of Ellen G. White, are truly in a class by themselves. Truly, we have very good reasons to give her books a special place in our personal lives and a special place in our church. Very good reasons to give those books, which are indeed in a class by themselves. Now, before we move on and look into different reasons why her books and writings are important for us today, I want us to take a few moments in groups of 2 or 3 as you sit to talk about the following. Why is the gift of prophecy, or in particular, I wanted to consider the gift of prophecy in general, but especially we are thinking about Ellen White. Why is the gift of prophecy and Ellen White important for us today? Why is it something we should pay attention to? I think there are many reasons. But let's just right now, as you sit, split up in groups of 2 and 3, and right now I start to share some thoughts that you have personally on that note. Why is this important? Why is this that is worthy our attention today? The gift of prophecy, and in particular, the writings of Ellen White. So let's go.
2 by 2. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 by 2 or 3 if needed. But if it works 2 by 2, that's cool. Yeah.
You first.
2 by 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, think of the illustration you yourself use with a lesser light and a bigger light, so you can say the moon and the sun. You could compare that. Then we could survive without having the moon. It would just be more difficult, like it's dark in the night. The moon is given for the night, and as we are living, or how should I say? Maybe we are at sunset. I don't know where we are in history of time, but the light is coming. The light coming, or is it here?
If you want to use that analogy, we could talk about Jesus coming as the sunrise and we are in the cross darkness.
Yes,
So
the
that's
moon,
where the moon is shining.
the moon is given for the night. So we need her writings and we look at the moon here now on the darkness of the world. We can survive without it, but it will just be very dark. Yeah.
I would also use another analogy. It's a magnifier. It gives such a precious insight.
You know, I could express myself well.
And I think it also adds some insights which we don't find in the Bible. There are certain prophecies and descriptions of details we wouldn't recognize.
What about the stars in that analogy? What, the stars are the lesser light compared to the moon?
I always thought that Revelation 12:1 is about women being the church, and I was just always wrong. There be great one day in heaven, woman clothed with the sun and the moon on their feet. So woman is a church, but moon is not the church, moon is the Old Testament prophecy.
Okay, yes, the analogy is not perfect. I just compared it using her illustrations.
No, I just learned recently that actually moon is not the church, but the woman is the church.
You thought the moon.
I thought the moon is the church and it's the woman. So moon is Old Testament, like prophecy, so she's the prophecy. So it gives insights we don't find in the Bible. And then there is application to our days. And what else? There is
Why did God let us see not only the moon but also the stars? He gave the sun for the day and the moon for the night, and the stars also for the night.
yeah, stars should be actually leaders in a church is based on revelation. No? Are they stars? Elders, or what they call?
Okay, so
7 stars are angels of 7 churches.
So
that should be individuals.
if we go according to the script, not having the moon, it will be dark. Not having the stars, it will be completely dark. So with all the elements were listed down, with all the leaders and you're in the darkness.
I guess the big reason is because it's God Himself. He's giving us insight.
Okay, I think we'll stop there. Basically, what I want you to do now is maybe you could share a few thoughts each group. Maybe not everything, but some bullet points of some things you mentioned. Maybe we can go around the table, and if each group can, share something, that would be cool. Some of your thoughts.
So we were thinking that Ellen White can be compared to the lesser light leading to the greater light, like moon to the sun, moon reflecting the sun. Her writings are magnifier, giving special insights. Then we thought about there are actually insights we don't find in the Bible, so there is extra light given on top for these last days.
Right.
There are applications to our days, and on the top of everything, it is not so much Ellen White, but it's God Himself talking through her. So we don't want to refuse what God is giving.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the magnifier thing. That's a good illustration of what she is, like to magnify the Bible. But like you said, there is also some extra information that is very valuable as well, in addition to primarily being a magnifier and helping us to understand and apply the message of the Bible. Yeah, next group.
As well, what Ludo said as well. So the elaboration makes we read in the Bible. When she elaborates on it, it seems more real and more convincing. So that's a part of add to what he said. Another point that we said it's important and why should we pay attention to, because it is actually one of the gifts that in the Bible that the Holy Spirit gives. So it should be important if it's listed among those.
Right.
So I will let the other group. Maybe I have a point that the other groups have. So.
Thank you. Next group.
I think we have almost the similar answers. It's a different wording. Because Ellen G. White says that her writings are lesser light, which leads to the greater light, which is the Bible. And as she said, that her writing expounds the Bible. But I wanted to ask you, because you said in your book that you don't believe that she has any new. She didn't bring new light, but we see new things. So probably I could discuss later that with you. You explain why you don't think she has.
No, I do think she brings new information for sure, but it's like, I think primarily she's magnifying the light already given. I think that's, and the new light is not like all the major doctrines and all the major parts of our message was revealed before. So in that sense, it's more like a more practical or minor, like it's not, yeah. So it's more on that level, I would say.
Also, the last one is that why is it important that we should pay attention to it? her writing also prepares us for what is to come or for eternity. So I think that's why it's important for us.
To prepare for eternity, yeah, to prepare for what's coming. That's a good one. Yeah, thank you. Next group.
I think in your book you mentioned the purpose of the existence of the church is to spread the gospel in the last days, especially during this time. And and we are a church member, so it's our duty to do this work. But how to do this work? How to finish this work? So the prophecy is a good guidance for us, because Ellen G. White, he has the insights from God. So he has a close relationship with God. So she can share with us, the church members, how to do this work efficiently. And when we learn his words and when we active and put his words into action, so maybe we can hasten the Jesus' second coming. So that is the prophecy is important for us. So we need to pay attention to, give us guidance.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good, very important reason to equip us to finish the work and to fulfill our mission. It's definitely a very great help we get in that area through the gift of prophecy and through Ellen White. Yeah. Was that the last group, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, good. Many good thoughts. And again, we could have probably spent a lot of time on this. I want to mention, I want to share with you 10 reasons why this is worth our attention, why this is important. It's not a list that includes everything. More things could be said. You mentioned some of the things. You mentioned some things I do not mention here, and more things could be added in that again. But I do think most of these things we'll mention pretty shortly. We'll not spend a lot of time on them. We could have spent a lot of time, much more time than we will spend on this topic. But I do think it is important to, if we fail to realize the importance of this gift, we will fail to be blessed by this gift like we should. We will not, the impact of this gift will not be as big in our lives and in the church if we fail to realize the importance, I believe. So I believe we need to, it's a great need. I think as a church, we have a great need to understand better the importance of this gift. Even people who do appreciate Ellen White more than the average church member. I think there is a need to understand better the importance, to clarify some very common misunderstandings that many people have in regards to Ellen White's importance and her role. Some quotes that many people that we have heard all our lives, we haven't read them in context, and therefore we have failed to. It has had an impact. I think, yeah, we'll get to that. You'll see. But anyway, let's get started. We'll not finish this morning, but we are getting started. So the first reason, some of them are very simple, but I want to kind of emphasize the importance. I want to let this importance of this gift sink in, and also to help us see also throughout all of this what a blessing this gift from God also is. So the first one is very simple, but also a very good one. Someone touched on it briefly, I think the first group on this one. But the first one I want to share with you guys is simply this. It is a message from our loving Creator and Redeemer. It is a message from our loving Creator and Redeemer. We have touched on this earlier, right? It's called the testimony of Jesus. And that's because it's a message. Jesus communicates a message to us through his prophets, through Ellen White. Now, if someone that is dear to you sends you a email or a letter, even a physical letter in the mail, whether it's a friend or a mother or a father or a sibling or a boyfriend or whatever it is, right? A wife, or like if someone that is very dear to you sends you a letter, we want to read it, right? We don't need someone forcing us to read it, right? We will be eager to read it. We will be eager to find out what that person has communicated. The more we love the person, I guess the more eager we will be. And I think it's important to realize, it's important to keep in mind that the testimonies to the church is not a message from Ellen White, it's a message from Jesus. This should in itself be good enough reason to pay really close attention to her writings. This should be a good enough reason in itself. Like if this is truly a message from Jesus, like we should be eager to find out, to read everything he has said, to take in all of the messages he has given to his church. Now, imagine with me that Jesus would come down to this earth. Now we know he will not touch the feet on the ground before the second coming, right? We'll meet him in the air. But imagine imagine if he would come to London. Imagine that Jesus would go to London, August 15, 2020. Now, imagine he would go there and he would go to the biggest soccer stadium they have there in London. And he set up a meeting there. He was going to preach a sermon. He was going to preach on that stadium. He was going to preach a message tailor-made for our generation and for the church and for the world in our time. Now, if that was going to happen this year, August 15, would you want to go there? That would be cool, right? Like I would, if necessary, I would sell my bed or something to afford to get over there. You know, like I want to be there. You know, like that would be great. That would be exciting. But when we think about it, that's basically what it is. The writings of Ellen White, it's a message of Jesus tailor-made for our generation and for the church, for the Christians, for the believers in our time. We should be excited. We should really want to find out. We should really make it a priority to find out what does he, the creator, our creator and redeemer, what tailor-made message, specially designed message for our time, has he given through those books. So our first reason is very simple, but very good and important and significant. And that is, it is a message from our loving creator and redeemer. That leads us to our second reason. This is something I mentioned before, but I want to re-emphasize it in this context right here. But I think this is also kind of simple, but also very good. And that's simply this. Prophets are God's main method of communication with his people. We talked about this earlier, right? The vast majority of what all of our knowledge of God and his will for us, we know as a result of the gift of prophecy. We know not as a result of him speaking through an audible voice to us personally. We know it not as a result of getting a vision or a dream personally, or getting an angel to come to us personally. We know it not as a result of God writing in the clouds, with the clouds, or writing in the sky. We know it because of prophets. That's God's main method of communication with his people. And when that's the case, that means that if this is God's main method of communicating, which it is, that means that prophets play an essential role in our personal Christian walks, in our relationship with God, and thus in our eternal destiny. So this is also kind of a simple reason, but I think also a very good one. This should be also a reason good enough in itself. If this is God's main method to communicate, you want to hear from God? Listen to his prophets, and in particular, the prophets closest to your time. That kind of tailor-make the message of God, the word of God, for your time and your circumstances. That leads us to reason number 3, which is also a repetition. Most of them will be new. This is the last repeating point, I think, in this list. But the third reason is the gift of prophecy is the most crucial spiritual gift. It's the most crucial, it's the most important, it's the most essential. One of the groups you mentioned, since this is one of the gifts of the Spirit, it's important, and I agree. Any gift of the Spirit is important. But we argued earlier that even more than that, add to that, you can say, we have plausible reasons to conclude that of all the spiritual gifts mentioned in the Bible, the gift of prophecy is the most important one, the most powerful one. It's the only one that is always mentioned in all the list of spiritual gifts. We find it mentioned in all the 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12, Ephesians 4. Not only that, it's always mentioned in all these 3 chapters. It's always mentioned either as number 1 or number 2. You find it listed either number 1 or number 2. All of this indicates, and it's that this is one of these gifts we really need. This is the one. Teachers are good, preachers are good, pastors are good, but if you have to choose between a pastor and a prophet, I hope you would choose the prophet, right? And we talked about that. So anyway, the gift of prophecy is the most crucial spiritual gift. Now, I think we will wait with getting into number 4. We'll not have time to finish number 4 if we start on it now. So instead, I want to show you a short video that I was wanting to show you at some point. This is like, the first video is pretty short. This is from Jim Nix again. This one is actually, you're going to eat soon. So this is kind of a good, you can learn a little bit about the food rules from the house of Ellen White, which is kind of a neat story. Short little video here. Okay, let's see. Just opening up the video here on the screen. Share screen. Here we go.
Ellen White was a good hostess. People liked to come to her house. In fact, they would often stay and stay. Why not? As I said, she was a good hostess. She had good food. She had a big garden. She had fruit trees. So people would come and stay. And meals were special times at Ellen White's home. Especially in the later years of her life, she had a cook because she was doing so many things and she had a big staff. So she had someone who would prepare the meals so that Ellen White didn't have to do the cooking herself. Now, there were some rules at Ellen White's house that made it very pleasant when you came together to eat. One rule was nothing unpleasant is to be brought to the table. Ellen White's view was you have all day to talk about your problems. If you're having a bad day, well, we can talk about it, but not at the meal table. So if you rule out any kind of negative conversation, you automatically have nice conversation during a meal. So that was one thing. Ellen White was happy to talk with you after the meal, but nothing unpleasant could be discussed at her table. Also, she had another rule that the grandchildren liked, and that was, I've summarized it this way. If you don't like it, pass it on. Everything was served family style. So the cook would bring in a bowl of potatoes or corn or beans or whatever, peas, whatever, and it would be passed around. And Ellen White had a rule. If you don't like something, don't say, yuck, I don't want carrots today. Just pass it on. There's going to be more food coming. And as the granddaughter that was telling me about this rule said, this was Grace, said, you know, there was good food at Grandma's house. So there was going to be plenty of food. If you don't want to, just pass it on. So no wonder people like to come and stay, because as I say, she was a good conversationalist, a good hostess. She had nothing but pleasant conversations at her table, and she always had good food.
Kind of nice, some nice rules there. Let's see, do we have time for a 2-minute video, a last one? Let me see, we need to close maybe. I think it's 150 seconds or something. Yes, no?
Yes, this was good.
Okay, 147. Can you see the new one? No, I need to redo it maybe. Let's see. Okay, so one last video and then we are ready to go. This one. Favorite memory of one of her relatives.
One time I was visiting with Ellen White's oldest granddaughter, Ella White Robertson. She had many memories of her grandmother. She was 33 when Ellen White died in 1915. So when I asked her the following question, she had a number of things she could choose from. I said, Ella, of all of your recollections of your grandmother, what is your absolute favorite memory? And here's what she told me. She said her grandmother was preaching one Sabbath. She was wearing a loose-fitting black sack dress. We've all seen pictures of Ellen White, so we can picture what, in our minds, what Ella was describing. And she said as her grandmother was talking that Sabbath, she was talking about the matchless love of Jesus for each one of us. She said the congregation was listening. They were into the message that Ellen White was presenting. And she said right in the middle of her sermon, her grandmother stopped. She paused, stopped, and looked up as if she were looking to the very face of Jesus. And she said, oh, Jesus, how I love you. How I love you. How I love you. She said a hush came over the congregation. But she said, of all my memories of my grandmother, that is my absolutely most favorite memory.
Okay, let's finish with a word of prayer. Who wants to pray for us today as we close? I have a problem there.
It's really good.
Dear Heavenly Father in heaven, thank you for your blessings, especially for the blessing of spirit of prophecy. Thank you that you reveal to details what is beneficial for us, especially in the end time. Thank you that you love us and we can love you because you loved first us. Please be with us through the Holy Spirit. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Joakim, have a peaceful good night.
Yeah, thank you. Have a nice meal over there. Some pleasant conversations. So. Bye-bye.
Bye.